Good evening, everybody. Hello, thanks so much for being here. My name is David Plyler. I'm with the Concert Office in the Music Division of the Library of Congress. And I know I saw some of you last night for a concert, so we're so glad to see you again tonight. We've had kind of a great week. I'm here tonight, and I'm very excited to be here tonight with Jesse Mills of the Horzhowski Trio. And they put together this very special program that is well represented at the library in terms of our holographed manuscripts that relate to it. And we'll get more into that when we get going here. But first, join me in welcoming Jesse.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a great pleasure, and this is something that's been a long time coming. And as these events are, they do take a long time to put together, but sometimes you just know it's going to be the right combination of things that's definitely worth all of the effort. So maybe I was thinking we could talk a little bit about how this did come together and how it came to be that we have this special program.
Well, I think the centerpiece, I think it's fair to say, of this concert is the two Charles Wuorinen piano trios. The first one, which was written in 1983. And then the world premiere of the second trio tonight. An incredible opportunity to hear something, very important work by a very important composer. And unfortunately, Mr. Wuorinen passed away in 2020, so it took this long to get this evening together and have it the opportunity to do it. But well worth the wait, but we can also say that this is the very last world premiere of any pieces by Charles Wuorinen. This is really a very special event, and we're going to do our best to do it justice because it's really an incredible piece. I'll tell you a little bit about the history that we have. Of course, I shouldn't take anything away from the Rebecca Clark and the Schubert E-flat trio, which are both also great pieces too, but let's just jump right in and talk about the Wuorinen first.
Sure, that works for me.
Just because it's such a unique thing to be doing the premiere. So our trio, the Horzhowski Trio, had an opportunity to play the first trio. I should backtrack even a little further. I personally worked a lot with Charles and played a lot of his string quartets with my mentor, the cellist Fred Sherry, who's in his mid-70s and lives 2 blocks from us. And he's been an instrumental person in my career. And I should also say Rieko, our pianist, who also happens to be my wife, also studied with Peter Serkin, who was also a big champion of Wuorinen's music. And so through our, fair to say, kind of family connections with Peter and with Fred, we've both had an opportunity to work on Charles's music with him over the years. Played also wonderful string sextet of his many times, and anyway, so yeah.
Can you say something a little bit about what it was when you say you were able to work with him? Oh. What was that like? What was that situation like?
Yeah, well, he was an interesting person. Everything he said had meaning. He was kind of quiet, but then when he got going, he wouldn't hold anything back, which is, I think, the good way to be. Fred Sherry would often facilitate opportunities to play pieces that we were playing together for Charles before the performances that we'd have. So we would often do them at Fred Sherry's apartment on 91st Street, but also sometimes went over to Charles's house on West End Avenue and play for him, and he would be sitting there and he would have the score and he would look carefully and we would go through it in detail, and then he would also just give us an overview of what he thought was missing, or what things that might not even be necessarily notated in the music that he had in mind, at least at that moment. But for us, it's incredibly valuable because it sort of humanizes this composer and it humanizes the music for us. And so we feel like there's as we do with older works too. Like the Schubert. There's not one way that you can play that piece. I mean, you can spend your life developing your own interpretation of that, and the music is so great because it allows for so many different types of performances of it, and that's true for Woronen's music too.
Just to add to that. That sentiment just a little bit and also give a little bit more background. I intimated that we have the manuscripts for these two Woronen trios that we're going to hear. The reason for that is because the Charles Woronen papers are here at the Library of Congress now. And so we have that full collection here. And so that's this, and one of the things I was just gonna note about that different ways of hearing things is that of the second piano trio, what we have are three drafts that have just different sorts of modifications on each one, and you can see him working through the whole process, which is what we love to see. We enjoy seeing a finished manuscript, but it's so much more fun to see, and not just fun, but
Right.
just interesting and everything to see what a composer's going through, even before they get to the point where they're commenting on the performance of it.
Yeah. So that's incredible. Yeah, to be able to see the thought process, right, and see what how he came to his final thoughts on a given passage. So I was backtracking about my prior experiences playing for Charles and playing other pieces, but then our Horshowski trio had an opportunity to work with him on this first trio that was written in 1983. And which was actually premiered by Fred Sherry, I believe. I know he recorded it, but with Charles at the piano.
Actually, the New York Times Review has a group called the Arden Trio.
Oh, okay, the Arden Trio. Yeah, that's right. It's on the music. This is Robert Besson, our manager, so we're friends.
Thank you, Robert.
But Fred Sherry definitely had a strong. I mean, he played this piece many, many times with Charles playing the piano. And so anyway, we had an opportunity to play it the first time at Fred Sherry's 70th birthday party in New York City. He had a lot of performers, Peter Serkin, many people playing there as well, various pieces. And we played this piece, and Charles was in attendance. And then we had another concert at the 92nd Street Y, and leading up to that, we worked with Charles on the piece. And we played for him, and then we were talking about doing having a commission from him, and because we really love his music, but also, especially working with him, got to kind of get to know about how he's so receptive to playing the music with so much nuance and character. And it's not just about clock in and play it perfectly, but it's about like every note has some sort of meaning to it. Tenderness or boldness, or these are the extremes, but all sorts of different musical gestures and things like that, and it just made us so invigorated to be encouraged about that part of the music from him. And so then when we were working on this commission, it was right after the 2019 concert at the 92nd Street Y, and we were doing our best to raise money for the commission, and then suddenly Charles passed away. Just a few months later, and we weren't able to finalize the commission. We weren't able to get the money together, and then Charles's husband, Howard Stokar, reached out and said, actually he wrote the piece for you, and so would you like it?
Wow.
So, and to me, that's also very inspiring on a human level, because here's this very successful composer, but he didn't wait for the money to come. I mean, he was so passionate about the art that he just decided to go for it and do it. And to me, that says a lot about him. And then it's a really great piece. And as you'll hear, there similarities to the first trio, but also differences. There's this theme that comes. The first thing you'll hear is this motive that comes back in many different keys, and almost like in a traditional music kind of way. As Mozart or Beethoven would in the development section or something, take a motive and play it in different keys. It's like his sense of harmony is not the same as Mozart and Beethoven, but he's doing that and then interweaving other material. And anyway, so hopefully.
I had a chance to listen to the rehearsal, and it's remarkable music because this was my first time hearing any of this from the second trio, and I'd never actually heard the first trio live, so it was a great pleasure to do that. But how many people here are familiar with Charles Warren's music or have heard? Good, okay, some. One thing I just want to say is that on top of what Jesse's already said, is that to me this music, and you can tell me if you have a different opinion, but is just inherently dramatic. And there's something, there's great beauty and lyricism in this music. And I encourage you just to have open ears with it and just kind of really just take it in. Each one is pretty bite-sized I mean, like, each one's about 10 minutes,
Yeah.
I think. And yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And what I would say, I mean, of course, we've been working on it so much, and so kind of have it in our, it's not 100% memorized, but we're listening for, we know what to listen for as we play, and that helps us. But I think if you're coming to it for the first time, well, Charles himself did not like people talking about his music. Apparently, he would always say, I remember he said once, just play the music. Don't talk about the music. But we're here, and I don't mind saying a few words about it, well, respectfully to him. But I think what he would say that because I think he thinks that the music is, like you said, so dramatic and so clear that it doesn't need to be explained. You know.
No, that's absolutely the case, I think. I'm so excited if you can't tell, but let's also talk though about we've got let's go back to the Rebecca Clark,
Yeah.
because this is the library has a bit of history with this piece. It was composed in 1921. It was the second submission of Rebecca Clark's to a competition that Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge held. The 1919 competition yielded the Viola Sonata that was, and then Coolidge unfortunately cast the deciding vote for Bloch. Not unfortunately because Bloch's piece is not worthy, but just unfortunately for Rebecca Clark because her piece is also very worthy of the win. So she didn't win that one. And then she came in second again with the piano trio, and it was done pseudonymously, so people didn't know who it was. But it was enough to where Mrs. Coolidge decided, okay, I'm going to commission you anyway. And so in 1923, she commissioned the Rhapsody for cello and piano. And so all three of these manuscripts are now held at the Library of Congress in the Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge Foundation collection. So that's kind of the quick background on that. But let's talk about this piece because it's just kind of an amazing piece, and it seems like it should be represented more in programming in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's unfortunately for her, for Rebecca Clark, she was a brilliant composer, and all three of those pieces that you mentioned are incredible pieces and individual in their own right, and yet because there's not more of her music, I think she gets shortchanged because people don't, if they don't know these three pieces, then they don't know her. And but yeah, I always try to, if I'm talking to audiences, before we play the Clark Trio, I always think it's almost unfair to say what it sounds like, because she's got her own voice, and but fair to say that there's a little bit of an impressionistic quality to the music, and the masterful simultaneously occurring themes that she's able to interweave themes, and actually the first movement and the last movement, you'll hear material coming back. It's very it's an arc, you go from the beginning and she takes you on this journey, and then you'll hear things that you've heard before in a different context, and but also it's very vivacious and especially in the last moment. There's she's fond of canons, and but the textures I think is what makes this piece special, because there's infinite gradations of energy. You have like really, really bold music. And then you have really tender, I guess I've used those words a lot tonight, sorry. But also very, very sort of like watercolors, and you'll be able to see through what you're hearing to hear what's behind it and all that. And and yet, but there's many different permutations. And in fact, when she writes some of the material, and then the second time it's like completely a different setting and dynamically and everything. So it's very specific. Anyway, she was a wonderful composer. I love that viola sonata as well. That's the first piece I ever heard of hers. It was the competition piece. Everybody at this competition that friends of mine were playing, they were all forced to learn that piece, and they all loved it. And then a lot of people play that piece a lot. I think it's probably the most famous of her chamber music works. Yeah.
No, definitely. Just to say one other thing about there's an element of kind of old and new that comes into this piece because it's 1921, so there's a lot of new stuff going on, but at the same time, there's almost a thematic transformation sorts of things that are happening, or permutations of the melodic material that are almost like in the Franck sense of like the return of even the melody that you play at the beginning of the second movement.
Yeah.
The relationship of that to the music that we hear in the first movement, it's like so it sticks out, but it also feels very new in this new context.
Yes, and it's very colorful too, I think. So as Schubert, maybe that's the connection between Clarke and Schubert, because Schubert also was master of the flavor of a different key center. And so you'll hear material in that piece, not to digress too much, but you'll hear material in that piece which goes from one key to the next key to the next key to the next key, and each feeling of each key is very different, and the color of each key is different. And so that's true of Clarke's music too, and there's a lot of freedom in the music too for us to be very expressive. And again, we've been playing this piece many times, and we always find that there's different ways to do it. And again, that means it's a good piece, because there's a lot of room for various interpretations.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say that, do you think that Clarke and Schubert both had it out for the pianist, or there's some pretty amazing pyrotechnics that you're using.
Yeah, for sure. And the Warren, so yeah, Rieko's got her hands full tonight, but we're in capable hands with Rieko. So. Yeah,
no, it sounds amazing. It's it's amazing what the piano can do. It shows kind of what, in the hands of the right composers, what the piano can do is as a support structure for everything else that's going on as well. I mean, not to downgrade anything that you're doing, of course.
No, actually, that's a very perceptive comment and worth talking about, because also every piano trio has their own style, and I think we really enjoy. This is what I love about the piano trio medium, is the fact that the strings make sound in a very different way from the piano. It enables us, me and the cello, to be a team sometimes, and for us to fit our sounds in and out, weave them in and out of the sonority of the piano. That's, I think, really special when that can be achieved, as opposed to just sort of soloing on top of everything and just in a very kind of broad strokes way. I think it's nice to be able to kind of find the places where you can come out of the texture and then come back into it. And I think there's an opportunity for that in all of this music, actually.
That's a really lovely way to put it. Thank you for that. Well, I mean, let's look at the final work in the program, which is just the lightest one, right? Of course, this is one of the cornerstones of the trio repertoire, the second Schubert trio from 1827, written just before he had a year left to live, and so it was not a great time for Schubert, obviously, but also one that he clearly was proud of, I think, and he got to hear it at least once, we know of, and then was trying to rush it through publication, but didn't. They sent him his copies after he had already passed away. But it's amazing. The stories of these. I mean, he finished this the same month that he finished Winterreise, so he was just able to handle these massive projects in a way that very few composers have been able to ever. And but it's such a, I don't know, it's such a monument in the literature. I'd love to hear like your thoughts about what it's like playing this piece, knowing that it's been in the repertoire for so long that how does it feel to come at it with you, in your perspective as a trio?
Well, it could easily be daunting. It could easily be intimidating for any trio to play a work like this, because the audience knows it. A lot of the audience knows it, and there's some iconic recordings of other groups playing it. But we don't ever feel that way with this piece because the piece sort of takes over. We're sort of in Schubert's hands, and yes, that's true for all music that we play. It's a balance between your own voice and the composer's. But Schubert's voice is so strong, and there's so much joy for us to get to play the music that actually we can sort of forget about ourselves a little bit. And I think that's when that happens, hopefully you feel it as well, because it really, it becomes something, we don't need to talk about religion, but it's sort of almost like that kind of spiritual feeling. I don't know how he's able to do that. I know the science of that, but it is what it is. It's just incredible music. And you had mentioned, what Winter Isaac. So, he's definitely. He wrote over 600 songs in his life, and you'll hear the vocal quality throughout. You'll also hear dance music in this, very poised and, it almost the flow of the music, of the rhythm, is what sort of is the thread that ties the whole piece together, and that's why it works, because it's such a long piece. And we can get to the cut and uncut version, but it is a long piece, but somehow doesn't feel long because it's just there's a regularity to the pulse that it's almost like hypnotic,
Yeah. Well, and he also seems to cover so much territory so quickly. Like the main theme at the beginning is kind of sublimated, suddenly, and then it gets taken over by the cello theme that comes in next. And it's amazing how he just is able to move through all of these ideas, but yet still stay in the same zone, as it were.
Right.
Maybe I'd be curious to your thoughts on the kind of the famous second movement.
Yeah.
And the relationship that has, to the finale, and also let's just get into it a little bit. There are two versions of this piece. With that one that has cuts in the finale of about like 98 bars or something like that. That Schubert apparently authorized and actually instructed the publisher to make sure you do these cuts. But it's unclear to me whether or not that was pressure from performance situation or what. But he had a nice initial performance, in terms of the players. But anyway, I'm going on too long. But what are your thoughts on those aspects?
Yes. So the original, the one that most people play is the cut version, because as you said, Schubert authorized it theoretically, and that was published by Henley, and everybody was playing that for a long time. And then Bärenreiter came out with this version. I believe that's the story, but anyway, I have two editions, and one has the cut and one doesn't. And we are playing the uncut, the original. So you'll hear all of the music that Schubert wrote, and I frankly don't know why he had to cut it, because it's the music that he cut is some of my favorite music in the movement. So, and it's when we're talking about this idea of overlapping themes with the Rebecca Clark. Well, this is really happening here in the Schubert as well. And so, there's a beautiful second movement where the first time you hear this, and if anyone has ever seen the movie Barry Lyndon, it will become familiar when you hear it played by us. But sorry, I'm not a singer, but if that melody sounds familiar, and you'll hear that's beautiful, played by the cello and then played by the piano, and there's a lot of space in between the notes, and it's very, very, very songful. And then at the end of. And then there's a third movement, which is like a beautiful minuet. It's a overlapping canonic dance in 3/4, and then later, and then a really long last movement. And at the end of the last movement, or in the sort of the golden section of the last movement, you have that theme coming back from the second movement, and overlapped with all of the music that you have been also hearing in the beginning of the last movement. So and somehow just it feels like from the afterlife or something like that. There's some. It's like you hear something that you already know, and that but in a different way, and it gives you this feeling that you have learned something.
Yeah, one of those spots, just out of curiosity, is if you could remind me if I'm correct about this, is one of the places that was cut the one that has that kind of repeated note motive on top
Yes.
of, and so it gets rid of that combo that kind
Right.
of becomes
Right, because that does happen with the overlapping of the cello theme and the faster music from the rondo, but yeah, then overlapping the second theme from, I guess from the last one. Yeah, then that happens at the same time. So you actually have 3 themes happening at the same time. And so that's the part that he cut. So I'm like, why did you cut that? So anyway, so it's great to hear it. But maybe, yeah, like you said, maybe it was pressure because the piece is long, and maybe they thought it would be performed more if it was a palatable length, but not too much longer. So we might as well do it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you're in for a treat to get to hear this work, and kind of in the context of this concert, I think it's also interesting to note that this idea of coming back, of recurring themes and stuff like that, is one that it actually kind of touches each of these in a different way. So it's really kind of a nice combination.
Yeah, and I think it's anytime you have variety in a concert program, but also, what's the opposite of variety? Things that are related. When you have both of those things happening, I think it's a success. So we think it's a good program, and thank you for having us for this concert.
Well, we're very excited about it, and I should give a shout out actually to our mutual friend, pianist Eric Hubner, who alerted me to the fact that the Horzhowski Trio was working on Warren, and I got very interested in that, and so that was kind of a way for this concert to start coming together. So thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. He's a great pianist as well. And so when was he here playing a year ago or so?
Yeah, a year or two ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, playing Roger Reynolds' Actions, I think, was the piece.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great also. Good friend. And yeah, he's a big Buffalo Bills fan. So I don't know how we last texted each other about the draft, the NFL draft. But I think this is a little bit more, I didn't mean to destroy the whole interview with that. I'm sorry. Anyway, no, he's great, and he and I have played a lot together as well, so it's wonderful to be able to do it here, and there's no better place to do the premiere, so thank you for making that happen.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for playing it. I would love to know before we go, just to kind of finish it up so you can have a chance to go and get ready, just what is kind of on the horizon for the Horzhowski Trio, and what are you up to? I mean, just curious to know what any upcoming recordings or projects.
Well, we really would love to record these Warren trios, and we've been in conversation with Bridge Records, which we did our first CD about doing that. We're still trying to figure out what's the best way. I mean, so I think this is a great way to play them live is with the Clark and the Schubert. I think it's just perfect. But on a disc, maybe you have different needs. So we're thinking about doing perhaps including some Schoenberg piece, Opus 19 solo piano, 6 little pieces that our pianist Rieko arranged for a piano trio. And she added a little bit of percussion as well, very small, little nuanced hits and things like that. But that's a great piece that Schoenberg wrote and doesn't need to be redone in any other way. But it is all on the piano with one person playing. It's kind of hard to hear all of the lines clearly, and when you divide it up with the strings and piano, you can really hear the expressive lines, interwoven qualities of them, and so that's really fun.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I mean, that's a piece that a number of people have approached, even for full orchestra. And,
Yeah.
But I've never heard a piano trio version, so that would be exciting.
If I may say, I think she did a really great job on the arrangements. I mean, she didn't add any notes. I'm playing violin and viola just to get the lower sonority with Ole sometimes, and Schoenberg was, as with Piero Linaire, obviously, it wasn't unfamiliar to have the violinist play a little viola, so we thought it was okay to do that. But anyway, that's fun. So we might record that in the near future because we really would love to record the Warren trios. And we're doing some concertizing the summer as we usually do. One thing that the Horzhowski Trio is really proud of is our connection with the Fischoff Chamber Music Competition. We have a prize that we give to, that the Fischoff competition gives to a successful young artist, piano ensemble, sometimes trio, sometimes piano quartet. And so we're doing that. And then we work with that winning ensemble every summer in a festival in Texas. So it's nice to sort of connect to the next generation. And they're really great players every year. They are coming out of there. So that'll be something that we're looking forward to this summer.
That's wonderful. You just reminded me of that notion of kind of teaching, and that we actually didn't mention who was Mieczyslaw Horzhowski, who actually played at the Library of Congress many times.
Yeah.
But especially his connection to Rieko.
Well, yeah, Rieko studied with Mr. Horzhowski. She was his last student. He lived from 1892 to 1993. Died just a few months short of his 101st birthday. But Rieko was his last student at the Curtis Institute and studied. She was 14 when they met, and he was 96. And Curtis said to her, she said, well, I'm 14, can I finish high school in Japan? Because she's originally from Japan. And they said, he probably can't wait for you to finish high school first. So why don't you come study now? And then she actually ended up studying with him for 4 years and he was an incredible musician, incredible person, who I think it was just his nature, but also because of at his advanced age, he just gave her like 2 and 3 hour lessons every week and was very, very hands-on. And he was also, I don't know when his last concert at the Library of Congress was, but I know he was giving concerts in Carnegie at like the age of 99, 100, so he was incredible up until the very end. So she's very lucky. Anyway, so when we started the trio in 2012, we decided to honor him with the name of our group. And it's a little bit difficult to spell if you're not Polish, but I think it's worth it because we can celebrate him and we can celebrate Rieko's connection to him. And there's a Casals. Everybody knows Casals. Everybody knows Rubinstein, but not everybody, unless you're a musician, knows Mr. Horzhowski. But I think they should know what an incredible musician he was. So.
Absolutely, and actually you can find at least one, I'm trying to remember, but at least one of his recordings with the Budapest String Quartet is on the Bridge Great Performances at the Library of Congress series. I can't remember what year that's from, but anyway.
Yeah, I was listening to them, I can't remember what it was. Was it Dvorak Piano Quintet maybe? Or maybe they did a few things together. Yeah.
One was, I think it was a Beethoven.
Okay.
Quartet. But
okay.
The quartet. But
But
there's a whole. I think that there might be several I'm thinking about. But anyway, check it out for sure. You would be disappointed. Yeah. But listen, thank you so much for speaking with me, and I'm very excited about this concert, and I know that our guests are in for a great treat. And I really appreciate your time. And
well, thank you. Pleasure is mine. Thank you so much. Yeah.